Well, welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robinsoff, and I'm here with Pastor Joseph Tillman, MDiv, soon-to-be Demon. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm not sick, so this is definitely an upgrade today.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was in a third world country recently, and was sick.
Right.
Not sick anymore. So
it's mean to those people to call them third world.
I was in the majority world.
Majority world.
There you go.
All right. Cool.
Got a little sick, but I'm good now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Patreon $5. Like and subscribe to the podcast. Emphasis on that one. Share, comment, follow, download. Facebook and Instagram is When I Heard This Podcast, and X and Locals is When I Heard This. Was that slow enough? Was that a good middle ground?
That was very good middle ground.
Okay.
Proud of you, Nate.
Because last week kind of did it too slow.
You did it way too slow.
I think that intro took like 4 minutes.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
So anyway,
that was well done.
All right. Well, today starts 37 weeks of talking about science versus Jesus.
Okay, well.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding.
Let's see who's going to come out on top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, hopefully it won't be 37 weeks, but it may be a few weeks.
We're going 150 billion rounds of science versus Jesus.
We're going to have a conversation of every single debate that's been had.
Yes, ever.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, the earth is flat.
Wonderful.
The
earth is flat.
Yeah. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, man.
Yep. Divine magic versus facts and logic.
Which one's which?
Yeah. We're going to find out.
We're going to find out soon.
All right. So this is going to be we're not going to get too deep into specific debates.
Correct.
This is more about what the debate is itself.
Yeah, and like setting the stage maybe.
Yeah.
For going into some of those topics a little deeper. But
yeah,
we're just dealing with the overall general topic of science versus religion or science versus Christianity.
What is the science versus religion / specifically Jesus, which is our religion debate?
Okay. All right. So I think largely what it has become viewed as is as a debate between science's facts and logic.
Mm-hmm. That's what I said.
And religion's superstitions and fairy tales.
Okay.
However, I think this is a really unfortunate caricature, which does very little in actually presenting the reality of science and religion.
Is it still a caricature when everyone thinks of it that way?
It's a caricature when it's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think everyone thinks of it that way.
I mean,
but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I think it actually saddens me in some ways because we're framing it like a debate.
Mm-hmm.
We're framing it as if science and religion have to be against one another.
Because it is.
But we're acting as if they're not congruent.
Okay.
But I think actually they are. All right. So I know just hold on.
All right.
So, all right.
Okay.
So I think as a Christian, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so as a Christian, I don't view science as something that is something that I must be against or that I must defend myself from.
Well,
Rather,
maybe you should.
No, I don't have to. Because I view science as that which actually leads us into a deeper understanding of the personal God who created the heavens and the earth.
Or the personal nothing that
created
the heavens and the
earth. So, all right. Because here's what I'm ultimately getting to.
Okay.
Science, like true science, okay, observable fact science,
Mm-hmm.
all right, that science does not threaten me. Like, I don't feel threatened by it at all. And it's actually quite the opposite. because what science is doing is actually deepening my faith and actually giving me insurance or assurance that there is indeed a personal God who created everything that we see, that we study, that we explore in this world. So again, science is nothing that it doesn't threaten me or bother me. It's something I actually gladly embrace.
What is the entire history of the science versus religion / Jesus debate?
Okay. All right. So I know how you say, good Lord, you saw my notes.
Yeah.
But all right, we're not going to give an entire history of it. There's no way we can do that.
Okay.
But I will give some summary points.
You can upload as long as you want of a video on YouTube.
This is true.
I think.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
All right. So the interesting thing about all of this is that it did not begin as a debate.
Okay.
It's not like you had science and then religion came on the scene and there was a debate, or there was religion and then science came on the scene and there was a debate immediately. That's not the way it played out. So the study of the world around us was not in opposition to theology.
Okay.
All right. So the study of God and the study of the world, so it's theology, the study of God, okay, and then what was more labeled kind of like your natural philosophy, or before it was labeled as science, that idea of studying the natural world, like studying those two things weren't viewed as an opposition to one another. All right. And so
who ruined it?
All right. Give me a second. We'll get to who ruined it. But
because I got a feeling the Christians ruined it.
No, they actually didn't on this one.
Okay.
All right. So there's science and philosophy and theology that were all interconnected fields of study.
Okay.
They weren't seen as like these branches that could not coexist with one another, often in the way it's framed now.
That's because the scientists didn't know anything yet. That completely disproved the religious people.
Okay. That's your theory.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I asked you the entire history, so I guess we'll keep going.
Yeah, we'll keep going. All right. So people saw
a little bit of foreshadowing there.
So people sought to understand the world in which they lived. Okay. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So they began engaging in the studying of the natural world, which is what eventually became known as science.
Okay.
All right. So the scientists were not trying to prove that there was not a God, or they were not going into it believing there was not a God, but rather they were studying the world around them because so many of them actually believed there was a God, and they wanted to see how this God actually created the world in which they lived.
They were studying observable things.
Correct.
Or as much as they could.
For as much as they could.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously you have the development of, the scientific method, which begins to move into a place of not only the observable, but gave space for hypothetical as well.
Okay.
Right? But even within that, it's again, what can I observe? What can I see as fact? Right? And then go from there.
Okay.
All right. Where it really kind of began to, I guess, split, if you want to put it that way, and where a quote unquote debate between science and religion began to occur was really in the 19th century with Charles Darwin.
Okay.
All right. And most of us are familiar with his work on evolution.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, and what his theory of evolution did was directly attack a basic premise of the worldview that Christians had of God creating humanity.
Okay.
All right. And so
every single other person on the planet believed that God created humanity. And then one guy who looked at a bird and was like, God doesn't exist. Completely blew that up forever.
No, I'm not saying that every other person in the world believed there was a God.
Okay.
I'm saying he kind of was he was kind of the pioneer in the field of science, saying that science doesn't jive with religion.
Okay.
Okay. Or in particular with a Christian worldview.
Was he trying to do that? or was he?
I don't think he was setting out to try to necessarily go on this attack of God.
Mhm.
I think he was simply trying to follow what he believed was the evidence in front of him scientifically.
Okay.
Now, again, what it led him to was a theory.
Right.
Unfortunately, that theory began then being taught decades later as fact.
Okay.
Okay. And so, but in his book, Origin of the Species, or On the Origin of the Species, he deduced that humans evolved over time and were not created, quote unquote, human as we once thought. So rather, they began as simple organisms and they naturally evolved over time to being the complex beings that we are today.
Okay.
All right. So this, along with
So how does that compete against religion? Why is that such a threat?
He was doing it in the Origin of the Species, and specifically in regards to humans and the evolution of humanity. Okay, so there's that one, premise that automatically was against an understanding of Christianity's view that God made Adam and Eve, or God made humanity as complex beings from point one.
Okay.
Where he's saying they actually evolved from something that was much more simple.
Okay.
Okay. And then, of course, that
so
opens
what theologically does that threaten?
A doctrine of creation.
Just that?
Just that.
Not about who we are as people or anything?
Well, sure. Because thank you for bringing that up, because it's not just the doctrine of creation, but within the doctrine of creation is embedded a doctrine of the image of God, that we are bearers of the image of God.
Okay.
And for Darwin, he was actually, so his whole idea of evolution would have gone against an understanding of humans being formed in the image of God.
Okay.
As rational.
If I keep asking questions, we're going to get too deep on
yes,
that.
yes. Because we're rational,
yeah,
free will beings.
So I guess the last question would be could we not have evolved into the image of God?
Okay. How about we do a whole, or we do a later episode on that.
Fine.
So that we don't get trapped there forever.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Well, you are saying that this is the first time that
sure,
the split happened for this topic. So
correct.
So, yeah. Anyway, whatever.
All right. All right.
Okay.
And what it opens up then is not just the origin of humanity, but the origin of creation itself, or the universe itself.
So it's threatening Christianity from page 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So in Genesis 1:1,
right. If the beginning's wrong, why am I going to read the rest?
Right. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
From a scientific perspective.
Right. So if I'm reading Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
And now I'm being told that's not true.
Right.
Right. It breaks, the whole.
Right. What's the point of the rest?
Right. Everything breaks down.
Yeah. I'm not even going to get to Jesus. He's like 2,000 pages later.
Right. So.
Depending on how
thick the Bible
big your
is.
font is.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So you've got Darwin's push, okay? And then you've got other factors such as the Industrial Revolution, which moved the Western world into modernism and into a modern worldview which deemed science and not religion as the source of the great questions of life. In other words, it was the source of answering the questions of life, such as origin and purpose, morality and destiny.
Okay.
And it was really at this point that science and religion started to become at odds.
Okay.
Because within modernism, science became the quote-unquote religion. Okay? It became the answer point. And so therefore...
Because we were figuring out how to do miracles with...
Yeah, and discovering things the world had never known before.
Yeah.
And the jumping point was, well, we didn't know that. We know it now. It must not be congruent with Christianity or be okay with Christianity. Therefore, we're going to reject an idea of God.
Okay.
And so like modern atheism was birthed out of this.
Out of
this
science.
out of this modernistic worldview.
Okay.
Okay.
What was old atheism?
Well, there was just,
or wasn't there?
I mean, there was just the belief that there was not God, but this atheism was rooted in science specifically.
Okay.
So this is like what you would be called, like, known as like the classical atheist.
Okay.
That rooted their belief that there was no God in science, saying science disproved it.
Right.
Okay. Or science, even if it didn't disprove that there was a God, it would not allow for there to be a God.
Oh, okay.
Because it would be deemed too unreasonable.
So there's no room for God to be in this world because of everything that we know now.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so that was kind of the movement of it. But in the midst of all this happening in the 20th century, so this is all kind of happening in the 20th century, right?
God was doing his own science.
Late 1800s and the 20th century. But what's interesting is, like, 60% of all Nobel Prize winners in the world in the area of science in the 20th century were Christians.
Okay.
So there wasn't this sense, like, it wasn't like just across the world that every scientist just stopped being a Christian or simply was not a Christian. And so many scientists are actually Christian now. I remember speaking, I was speaking one time on worldviews and sharing about, like, the cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, and those kind of things. And I didn't know it at the time, but one of the directors of the CDC, however you feel about the CDC, but one of the directors of the CDC was actually in attendance.
I love the CDC.
Good job. We're not canceled. Yeah. All right. So, but one of the directors of the CDC.
Everything they say is right.
All right. So. What's in the cup, Nate?
What?
Nothing. All right. So. So one of the directors of the CDC happened to be in attendance when I was sharing on this.
Mm-hmm. And they stood up and said, wrong.
Nope. He actually came up to me afterwards and he said, actually, most scientists that I know that work with us, and he himself was a scientist, he said, actually are Christians.
Okay.
So that was his perspective. Okay. And he wasn't saying that all scientists were Christians. He was saying the ones that were working with him that he knew were Christians. Mm-hmm. Okay. That even as there's this continued propping up of science as anti-religion, I think that's specifically found in the academy, in universities.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it's not found in other places as well, but you see a lot of that and a lot of scientists work in universities, so it's kind of like a blanket statement. But what I'm saying is, I think you find a lot of that teaching being passed down in the universities where, well, of course, if you're in a science class, surely you cannot believe that there is a personal God that created everything. And, you know, and I mean, and going to one of the public universities I went to, that was the case. Like, surely you don't believe that.
Didn't you go to Jesus classes?
I did for my for my Master's of Divinity, and actually one of those classes, I had a professor, and he was a sociologist, but a professor like questioned my sanity for how could I actually believe that there was a God? Yet he was one of my professors.
Cool. You thought we were teaching on the Bible this semester.
Right.
Wrong.
False.
Yeah.
So
here's a science.
Yeah.
Read it.
Yeah. So I really believe the idea of science having to be against religion is just not reality. Even though that, I believe, has probably become the common perception of it.
All right. Well, all the science people say you're wrong. Every single one of them.
Because they're all against Christianity, obviously.
Okay. So you are a pastor.
I am.
So when you hear, when you
Me.
hear someone say science versus Jesus, what comes to mind first?
Okay, what comes to mind first?
Yes. Like what topics come to mind? Or what is...
Well, can I say the very first thing that comes to my mind is why?
Why what?
Why does it have to be stated as science versus religion? Or science versus Christianity?
Because that's the headline to like a billion articles.
Right, but I would much rather it be stated as science and religion or science and Christianity.
Okay.
As a pastor, that's what I'm thinking. Okay. Because I also think of how we as Christians have become afraid of the scientific world and the scientific community. And
that's because atheists are really smart.
Yeah, I think, and I think somehow we believe that if we or our kids get involved in science, that automatically is the doorway to leaving the faith.
Well, we've talked about this before.
Yeah,
at some point, but
we did a while back. But I think
I'm not saying don't talk about it now. I'm just saying if we want to go further.
Right. For far too long, we as Christians have basically abdicated our place within the field of science.
Right.
We actually need people to enter into the fields of, physics and biology and chemistry and mathematics. And we need Christians studying, the world around them and then sharing what their discoveries are.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's my first response is why does it have to be framed that way? But then I also understand that one of the reasons it's framed that way is because we as Christians have allowed it to become framed that way.
Okay.
And I think sometimes Christians even frame it that way. Of like, all you need is faith. All you need is Jesus.
I framed it that way.
Yeah, but it just, I guess that's just, it shouldn't have to be framed that way. And I think when it's framed as a debate, that bothers me too.
Okay.
Because I wish that there'd just be, we'd frame it as conversations. Like we're going to have conversations between, for as me as a Christian with those who are scientists, whether they're Christians or they're atheists or whatever, that we actually would be able to have conversations with one another, not just debates, that we could actually learn from one another. Because I think there's a shortfall on both sides. I think you have individuals that are in the Christian faith that don't understand enough of science. So kind of all they hear about science is how they're teaching evolution and other crazy stuff that are quote unquote against scripture. So let's just shun it all. And so they kind of shut down the conversation. And then you've got those in the scientific community who maybe they did not grow up in church, or maybe they even did grow up in church. And they believe Christians are flaky or are unintelligent or are ignorant and therefore you can't have a conversation with them. And so...
Well, if Christians are just being like, hey, I got a Bible, don't need your science, then they are shutting down the debate.
Sure. Or the conversation.
Or they're going to lose.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is I think there's a whole lot more to understand about Christianity than just the shallowness of that perspective from a section of Christians. And so that's all I'm saying. Like there really needs to be healthy dialogue with one another. And I appreciate the debates and all that kind of stuff to some degree, but yeah, I really wish there'd just be healthier conversation. And I will say this, that too many Christians make assumptions about science, and because of its unknown, they feel threatened by it. Right.
Right.
And I think the same
goes. There's no verse to point to prove you wrong.
Right. If that's what they believe they have to do.
Right.
To defend their faith. And what I'm saying is that's a short-sighted view of defending the faith. It doesn't have to always just be, well, this is what's in the Bible. Okay?
Okay.
Because I think Christianity should be a faith with reason, or one of the phrases I love is faith that's seeking understanding. And so, in other words, that we should embrace the study of God's creation, and that we actually might understand God's creation and how it works and how it functions in a much better way than we do. I have found that I am by no means like a scientist or deep into science or any of those kind of things, but I've just found that in the small amount of reading and studying and then teaching on some of these things, that I am actually find myself more amazed at who God is because of the intricacy of the design. And so when you get and you're studying the design of the universe, the design of humanity, the design of cells, like all of those things to me are just incredible and actually lead me to go, how can you almost say there's not a God with the intricacy of the design? And so I guess all I'm saying is I wish more Christians would avail themselves of studying and reading and not being afraid of science. And I wish more scientists would understand, especially those who are not of faith, or maybe they grew up in a real shallow faith setting that didn't explore these kind of questions, left them wanting more. I wish they would find individuals, Christians, who do love to intellectually study, examine, research, and converse along these topics.
Okay, so in science versus religion, what are the biggest topics of debate surrounding that?
Well, the two primary ones are the origin of everything.
Okay.
So we can frame it as the origin of the universe.
Okay.
Okay. So how did the universe begin? Right? Was it God? Was it Big Bang? Was it, what was it? Okay. And then I think the second is the origin of human life itself, which we touched on a little bit earlier.
Okay.
But it gets into the creation versus evolution debate.
Okay.
And I think those are probably the two primary ones that are talked about. I mean, obviously, you have things like, old Earth versus young Earth, and the flat Earth debate, but I think those are the two.
There's no flat Earth debate.
There really shouldn't be, but boy, there is.
There's not.
I know. So, but there is,
Yeah.
and that's so sad.
Yep.
But anyways, and I partially blame Christians for that one.
Because that was our theory first.
Because a lot of Christians have bought into it.
Really?
Yes.
Oh. Why?
There's this one. Anyway, when it talks about the four corners of the earth in Scripture.
Oh.
And they literally think it's four corners, so therefore the earth must be flat.
Oh. All right.
Yeah, that's exactly. Anyways, but
you're not supposed to take the Bible literally. Are you kidding? Oh.
Christians. Well, okay. I'll go pause on what we're talking about. And actually, that's a true statement, what you just said.
Oh, good.
Right. Don't take it literally, but read it for what it is. And, if common sense makes sense, seek no other sense. Okay.
You're not supposed to actually drink his blood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you read poetry in the Psalms.
Yeah.
Like poetry.
Where's the four corners of the
literal.
earth verse?
You've got it in poetic language within Psalms and in the prophets.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Anyways. I know. And it's some apocalyptic literature. But anyway.
All right. Well, I'm leaning science again.
But I think those two that we talked about before, the origin issues.
Yeah.
Those are how the universe began. How did humanity get here, evolve here, develop, whatever. Those are the two bigger issues.
Aliens.
That is a theory.
Yeah.
That's a theory.
I think that's what I'm going to go with.
You gonna go with aliens?
The rest of the episode, yeah.
I mean,
Aliens. I don't like getting your theories.
That's there's actually scientists who believe that it's aliens.
Aliens created the Matrix, and that's what we're in. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Taking it a step further.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay. As a pastor, what do you and a MDiv demon who has studied the Bible? All right. What do you think about, and as a person who just lived through the past 5 years?
Okay, I can bring my human experience into this too. Okay.
Hashtag love the CDC. What do you think of the scientific community as a whole in the world today?
Wow. Okay. So here's
how are those guys doing?
All right.
And women.
And women.
Yeah. And the other ones. Just answer the question.
All right. Yes. All right. To the men and women in the scientific community. All right. I guess, okay, let me first say this, that I do know people in the scientific community.
Okay.
So it's not like I'm talking about these abstract people or these, people that I don't know that, and I've got great respect for them. And a lot of them are actually Christians. Okay. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And I think the work they do is absolutely unbelievable. And I think they have unbelievable minds and are able to observe, understand, and explain things in a way that honestly I can only dream of.
Okay.
So when I have taught apologetic classes before and we've kind of dove into fine-tuning and the understanding of, let's say, cells, oftentimes I'll bring in one of these individuals to be a guest lecturer for that. Because they can just explain it in a way that I simply cannot.
When you say friends in the scientific community, do you mean like doctors and people that you know, or are you talking about like people doing?
No, like people doing research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, and again, I think it's important to note that not all scientists who are atheists are hostile to religion.
Okay.
So many of the kind of traditional or classical atheists, like we mentioned earlier, they disagree with religion, but they're not like hostile against it.
Okay.
And I think that's a really big difference between what you find in the new atheist of today.
That the new atheists of today are hostile?
Yeah, and let me give a framework for that. So like the traditional classical atheist, they disagree with religion, okay?
And
they don't believe there's a God.
You're saying atheist because science led them to atheism?
Either science led them to atheism or they're atheist and they have used science to confirm
atheism.
Their atheism.
Okay.
And so I think there's traditional classical atheists. They research, they experiment, they observe, and they make really incredible contributions to not only the scientific community, but to just the world as a whole. And they can actually have cordial debates and conversations with men and women of faith. And this is healthy. So it's not, so yes, they disagree with religion, of course, because they're atheists, but it doesn't mean that they're like openly like angry and hostile toward it. Okay. And so they may assume that it's just the opium of the masses, but whatever. They're going to keep doing their scientific work. It doesn't affect them.
Oh, like religion is the opium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like they're going to keep doing their work. Doesn't affect them. Move on. Right.
Right.
But then there's unfortunately this kind of camp of the new atheists. All right. So that's including people like Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris and Dennett. And this new atheism is they say they are scientists.
Mm-hmm.
They say they're grounded in science, but they've become incredibly hostile to religion or to Christianity in particular. And they really believe that, that religion as a whole just needs to be completely removed, wiped off the face of the earth. The world would be better if that was the case. Okay. And so
that seems very wrong.
Well, and what's interesting is that, and if you've read, like Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, or if you've, listened to him speak, just pull him up on YouTube and there's, a bajillion videos of Dawkins speaking. And he really has at this base level, this really massive issue with Christianity and religion. Okay. And he really believes it's just doing so much harm to this world.
That's because they all think the earth is flat.
Well, let me put it this way, that has been his stance. Recently, like very recently, he's actually come out and said, well, maybe religion does have a place in society. Maybe
just over there.
Maybe it does have a place in kind of softening the way we interact with people and creating a morality base and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he would be the first to tell you that he believes that the God of the Bible is a sadistic, vindictive God. Okay, that's his perspective of the God of the Bible. Okay. But what's saddened to me is that, so he really is not overly open to having conversations with Christians and actually learning about Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
He's made assumptions about Christianity. He's not a theologian, but he acts as if he understands all of the Christian doctrine and theology. And in one debate, Dawkins was presenting, this vindictive, sadistic, angry, warmongering God. And I love Dr. John Lennox from Oxford was debating with him, and he said, he told Dawkins, he said, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either.
Okay.
Because you've completely misunderstood the Christian God. And Dr. Lennox is a believer. And so I think that with the new atheist, again, there's just been this great hostility. And what I'm getting to is I think that has really been kind of the underpinning of this science versus religion debate that has really become like where they're completely at odds. Because they position it, the new atheists completely position that the two are completely at odds with one another.
Okay, so you're saying that the scientific community went from, hey, we just observe these things and we are led by science to this theory that might not mesh well with the Bible or Christianity.
Right.
To we need to use science to eradicate religion from the world.
Yeah, like I think that's been the progression over time.
Okay.
Yes. I don't think, and we have to be careful because like there's scientists who are Christians, there's scientists who are Hindus, there's scientists who are Buddhists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Scientists who are Muslims. There's scientists of all levels of faith. So it doesn't mean that all scientists are atheist or agnostic. What I'm saying is with the new atheist group who are scientists, they're the ones who have really kind of banged the table saying, no, science is the truth. All of the truth claims must be rejected by whatever religion. And we simply cannot sit here and talk about science and religion together. Like they refuse, they simply believe it's just completely incompatible.
Well, there's way too many scientific theories for me to just believe in science versus my religion.
Right.
So it kind of seems like what they're really saying is you need to hate God with me.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting. Like
I can't believe all of science. There's too many theories.
Yeah, and
did we come from aliens? Are we in the Matrix?
I know.
You know what I'm saying?
I know. And when you
are there multiple universes?
Right. When Dawkins is pressed of like, how do we get here? Like, or who created the universe? I mean, like, there's not good answers. He's given various answers over time. Sometimes it's aliens.
Right.
Sometimes it's we don't know yet. Sometimes it's, well, something came from nothing.
This has been my problem with religion, is that there's too many different answers for all this crap. And it's like, if I just, what am I going to believe in? Religion, or if my options were religion and science, it's like there's at this point there's more different science than there is different religion.
Yeah, if you're
like, yeah,
and I'm following. And I think that's part of the problem that even the traditional atheists have with the new atheist. Like there's actually like they don't agree with each other, and a lot of it stems from the new atheists take theories, scientific theories, and begin to present them as scientific fact,
right?
Ignoring what's actually observable, what's actually factual,
right?
Ignoring that there could be other options.
Which, to me, looking at it, it's like if religion takes faith and presents it as fact,
yeah,
and it's like, what's the difference? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
there's no difference between any of you at this point.
In other words, what you're actually saying there is that both of them are taking leaps of faith.
Yes.
Yeah, and in fact they are, right? And was it Norman Geisler's book that where the book of he was a co-author of it. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
Right.
And that's just and that was just kind of a offhand statement he made. It turned into a title of this book. But like, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Like, there's actually, for him, there was more leaps that he had to make to believe in some of the scientific theories of the origin,
right,
or of how all this fine tuning actually came to being and worked in the world. It took too many leaps for him compared to Christianity, which backs itself all the way up to the existence of, if you want to get down to the smallest molecular levels, right? And the universe came from that, fine, but it's kind of like, well, but how did they get there? How did those molecules get there? And so, how did those, where did those molecules and atoms come from, right? So, like, there had to be something. And so for a Christian, it's just going that one more step.
Yeah.
Of saying there's something outside of time and space that's transcendent from time and space, outside of it.
Right.
And it actually created this. Whereas
aliens.
Or aliens. Or like Dr. Cross would say, no, something came from nothing.
Okay, so you kind of hit on this earlier.
Okay.
But today, are there not like atheists, I guess, maybe.
Okay.
But like scientists who only go into the field to disprove the other side. They only go into science to disprove the other side. Like, hey, look, we took this picture of the Big Bang because we were there when it happened, and here's the picture, on the science side. And then the Christians are like, hey, we found this sandal in a cave, and it's scuffed exactly where it says that Jesus stubbed his toe in Proverbs. So that proves religion. And it's like there's these two competing sides of people who just only feel like they are doing science in order to convince me of something, and I don't like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like it from anybody.
From either side.
Yes.
No, I agree with you. I do think there are those from each side that go into this field. Well, I mean, obviously they have to have a passion and a desire for it, but they're using those fields to absolutely disprove the other side.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
And they make documentaries about these people all the time.
They do.
Yes.
And how their discovery or how their new theory is going to completely dismantle the worldview
Life
or the
belief
system that the others have had. Right. Yeah. So I absolutely do think that it's coming from both sides. And I think some actually have like good intentions going into it. It's not just malicious.
Both sides?
On both sides.
Okay.
I think there's actually good intentions. So like, I think for those that are going into it, and maybe they're either an atheist, agnostic, or they don't really care, right? They're not believing in anything, just whatever. I think that they may be going in going, all right, we do not like religion. We want to help free humanity from this plight of religion.
Okay.
We want to free these ignorant individuals or these suckers from the plight of religion. Or even these really intellectual people that are smart, but they say they're Christians. Like, we need to really help show them
how stupid they are,
how wrong they are. And I do think there is that
Look
side.
at this pie chart, moron.
And so I do think that there is that side that is going in, trying to disprove, but they're doing it because they think it's actually of a benefit to the other, right? Of those that are in religion to be set free from the religion. Okay.
It's all annoying.
And I think, well, it is. And then I think there's Christians that go into science, and yes, they love the field of science, but they're there to, that's their agenda, right?
Yeah.
To prove Christianity is true scientifically, or to at least prove that some of its claims, its truth claims are actually true.
Right.
And so they're going into it for that reason. And same thing. Hey, if we can show them enough evidence, they'll believe that Christianity is real. They'll believe these truth claims are real that Christianity makes. And so yeah, it's absolutely going on both sides. And I think the problem is when you go in with an agenda, you're not open to actually seeing what's really there.
Right.
It's almost like you're going into a field that is completely dependent upon you being open-minded enough to not only observe, but to make rational conclusions based on what you're observing.
Right.
That it's not so filled with bias. And I think, unfortunately, when you go into it with this much bias, it can, because then you're that's like almost like you're standing on that, where I would rather Christians go into science saying, I want to go in to science to help people see the beauty of God's creation. Okay. Right. They can, in other words, they can go into it with a mindset of, I want to discover God's creation. I would love for others to see God's creation, but it's not there for me to just destroy the other side. Because then I feel like you're going into it just wanting to attack. And it's one thing to defend our faith. It's one thing to want to discover the beauty of God's creation and to understand it in a greater depth. Awesome. But then if it has to become your soapbox, right? Where, see, I've got these X, Y, and Z things. Now listen to me, all you who are wrong. And I think it's kind of maybe the attitude in which they're going into it with, and the way they're using what they discover and what they learn and what they study. And I think if both sides went into it, again, way more open-minded and way more willing to have a conversation than just yell at the other side to say they're wrong, it would be a lot more beneficial for both sides.
Yeah, it's like I could point, you watch these things and listen to this science stuff from both sides, and you can just point to a different thing and say, see, that's like, they're complete. It's like all of it is two completely incompatible things. Like they cannot both be true. And so I don't know who to believe. Because I know you're both biased.
Right.
So I'm just going to all of this is wrong. Like, what else? What other conclusion can I come to?
Yeah. And I think, for me as a Christian, right, I love the fact that science, that logic, that being reasonable does not threaten my faith and does not take away from my faith, but actually affirms and confirms the faith in which I hold.
Okay.
And so for me, I don't have to use science or logic or philosophy to tear down another. It really can be encouraging for me and encouraging in my own faith. And it doesn't threaten me in any way, right? Like that I can actually grow in my faith. And I guess as Christians, we really need to have more of that posture, right? Yeah. Like, yes, like at the end of the day, we're Christians because we have faith that Jesus Christ is who he says he is, and that he did what we believe the Bible is saying that he did, right? He came, he was born of a virgin, he lived a sinless life, he died, he resurrected, he ascended. Like, ultimately, my faith is in that, right? And then I think the beauty of science and archaeology and philosophy and logic is you're able to take those other fields and take it with Scripture and see actually how it brings life to Scripture, helps explain Scripture, helps explain what's going on in God's creation, and throughout, and it gives an understanding of what God has done throughout history. So I think it just, in other words, it adds to, doesn't take away from. And if we would be more open to that, we probably wouldn't be receiving the hostility side of this of scientists who believe we just don't care about that.
All right. Well, there's like 40 billion more questions.
Sounds great.
Depending on what you believe.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
That was fun.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. It was either a really good conversation or a completely pointless one.
Well, we'll let people decide.
Yeah.
They can comment to say pointless or not pointless.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been the When I Heard This Podcast. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast, and X and locals at When I Heard This. Like and emphasis on the subscribe, share, follow, download.
Do it.
Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download. Patreon $5. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinsoff, and you can follow Joseph on Instagram at
Rev Joe T.
This has been the When I Heard This Podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.